Spoilers for WandaVision Episode 7. Welcome to ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in WandaVision Episode 7. So let's talk about Agnes. See, I've been saying from the beginning that she was really Agatha Harkness, but before you give me too much credit, I did resist the idea that she was a villain, because in the comics, Agatha is Wanda's friend and mentor. She's not evil, she's more of a gray character, and she might still be that in the show. We do have a video coming out that breaks down every clue that it's been Agatha all along. What? So keep an eye out for that. The name of this episode is Breaking the Fourth Wall, and like everything else on WandaVision, it has a lot of meanings. One, the episode follows a 20-teen sitcom mockumentary format like The Office, Parks and Rec, or Modern Family.
You want to be that rock that they can grab a hold of in a stormy sea. Actually, a rock would sink, so a floating rock.
2, Monica breaks the fourth wall and enters this sitcom world. Just as New Rockstars pointed out, when she was kicked out of Westview, she shattered through 1, 2, 3, 4 different walls. And 3, because of all of the extremely meta moments.
I've been watching WandaVision for the past week.
We all have, Darcy. We all have. When Wanda wakes up, the blanket is covered in hexagons, probably the millionth use of hexagons in this show. In fact, the hexagon within a hexagon shape even implies the expansion of the hex we saw last episode until it multiplies into even more hexes, which later in the episode we see starting to happen. I did a whole video about the hexagons where I theorized that this shape is actually the building block of the universe, as evidenced by the wormholes used to space travel. Now, if this is the case, maybe Agatha is using Wanda to create a new pocket universe constructed of linked hexagons. Or it could be the bees.
Not the bees!
Got all that from a blanket. Not bad, Ryan. Not bad. As the boys are playing video games that use controllers from different eras, including a Wii, a GameCube, Atari 2600, and just plain old Uno cards. Also notice that they're wearing the colors of their costume from the comics where they're the heroes Wiccan and Speed. We actually just put out a video explaining their comic origins and how they are going to be the future of the MCU. Check that out if you have time. In this episode, Wanda is depressed, a big contrast to how she acted in the sitcom's pilot.
My husband and his indestructible head.
This is because, as the sitcoms have aged up and moved closer to Modern Family era, she is getting closer to the real world, a world where she's still grieving the loss of Vision. As he reminds us,
It's mere weeks ago.
and this is where we get into the show's larger theme of grief and loss.
The worst thing I can think of has already happened to me.
Wanda surrounds herself in a fantasy world to avoid coping with reality, a larger metaphor for how we might turn to drugs, alcohol, or even antidepressants to reshape our personal reality while we're in the mourning process. So let's take a closer look at the antidepressant commercial. Once again, the woman is a proxy for Wanda.
Feeling depressed? Do you just want to be left alone?
The Drug Nexus has a few meanings. One, the red capsule is obviously a nod to Wanda's red energy powers. But in the comics, Wanda is also a Nexus being, meaning that across all realities, she's the one constant, the axle that the wheel of reality spins around. That could also be the case here. Maybe because Wanda's powers are tied to the Infinity Stones, she's some kind of anchor across different realities. Agatha might be using her energy to open up the multiverse, which would be further explored in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. I loved this mind-bending moment when the actress walks away from the bed, which they would have done by nailing an identical bed to the wall in a different shot. This is visualizing the feeling that she can walk out of her pain into a world where the laws of science no longer exist, just like Wanda has.
Side effects include feeling your feelings, confronting your truth, seizing your destiny, and possibly more depression.
But this commercial seems like it's encouraging Wanda to break free from Westview and confront her grief. If that's the case, then maybe that's been the purpose of every commercial. They're Wanda's subconscious, warning her to break out of Westview. The Drug Nexus might also be a reference to the nexus of all realities. In the comics, this is a place where all realities intersect. It could be located in Agatha's basement here in Westview, New Jersey.
State bird, the mosquito.
Wanda's milk bottle also shifts into different eras, like the controllers and the living room later on. Now, if you watch this opening with closed caption on, you'll see that Wanda is listening to WNDA for Wanda, and also for non-disclosure agreement. The DJ's talking about the aftermath of Halloween, and even alludes to the fact that the kids are only in Westview for one night a year. Now, I think that Agnes has been controlling everyone's mind, but Wanda has always been in control of the environment. After all, we saw her reform a wall after kicking out Geraldine. But now, since Westview is expanding, Wanda's having a harder time focusing her abilities. The cereal, Sugar Snaps, is a reference to Thanos' snap. Now notice that on the back of the box, there's an elephant on the outside of the maze, and the center of the maze says goal. This is symbolic of the journey that Vision takes, from the circus outside of town to the center where Wanda is. There's even a circus clown on the front of the box. The opening credits take us through the decades, across Westview, and are reminiscent of the intro to the show Happy Endings, and that show was produced by the Russo brothers. But I especially like this one, that looks like a kidnapper letter that reads, "I know what you are doing, Wanda." In hindsight, this is definitely Agatha manipulating Wanda into feeling guilty so she can be easier to control. And it ends with a calendar date with a heart drawn around it, exactly what started the sitcom to begin with.
There on the calendar, someone's drawn a little heart right above today's date.
When Vision wakes up, the aspect ratio shifts from the outside world to the show WandaVision. He's in the circus that appeared at the end of last episode, and Darcy now only gets a guest spot in the show, but she's a main character who gets her own direct address. I love Darcy in this show. She's always been my favorite MCU side character.
Look at you! Still all muscly and everything.
And I'm glad that she finally has a chance to shine in WandaVision. I'm also an MCU completionist, so I actually listened to the MCU audiobook, The Cosmic Quest Volume 2 Aftermath. This audiobook tells us what happened to Darcy and Eric Selvig right after Thanos' snap. And I listened to it on Audible, the sponsor of this week's video. Audible is offering ScreenCrush fans a free 30-day membership. Visit audible.com/ScreenCrush or text ScreenCrush to 500-500. Audible actually features many stories from the Marvel Cinematic Universe that you can't find in the movies or TV shows. There's the Thanos origin story, Titan Consumed, or Infinity War, The Hero's Journey. This audiobook tells the story of what each member of the Avengers was doing between Civil War and Infinity War. And you can always listen while you're doing other things, like driving, playing with your dog, or fighting off a Chitauri invasion.
Gatsby believed in the green light.
If you're an MCU fan, I highly recommend listening to these audiobooks on Audible. It's the best way to get the whole story of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. As an Audible member, you'll get 1 credit every month, good for any title in their premium selection. You'll also get full access to the Audible Plus catalog. It's filled with thousands and thousands of audiobooks, original entertainment, and podcasts. And if you start listening to an audiobook and it's not your thing, you can swap it for another title for free. So visit audible.com/ScreenCrush or text ScreenCrush to 500-500 to get your free 30-day trial. Then Vision gets some guff from a circus strong man with an S on his belt, which could be a nod to Superman, whose costume was actually designed to mimic a circus strongman.
Vision is made of vibranium. They literally inherited tough skin.
Which of course was stolen from Wakanda by Claw. Now she's eating cereal out of a bright red bowl, which symbolizes her powers. But notice that in this episode, she wears a lot of blue and purple, the color of Agnes's energy. This symbolizes that Wanda is now surrounded by Agnes's power and is under her spell. On the way to the Rogue Sword site, Jimmy Woo discovers that Hayward was trying to use Vision as a weapon. The operation codename is Cataract, which is a waterfall, but also a membrane that clouds your vision. Or in this case, clouds Vision's memories so Sword can control him. This explains why Wanda took him from Sword. It was a rescue mission. Now there was a lot of speculation about Monica's aerospace engineer friend. Teyana Paris even tweeted to be excited, leading to speculation that she would meet Reed Richards or Blue Marvel. But Major Goodner is an even cooler Easter egg because she's your mom. Now did you notice the rover is shaped like a hexagon? Does that mean something? Or do I just see hexagons everywhere? I know Doug does. And then we go back to the circus, which like Westview is a temporary entertainment to distract people from the outside world. Vision frees Darcy's mind, but her brain doesn't begin to melt, unlike what happened to Norm.
Just make her stop! Now tell me this.
This could be because she hasn't been under Agatha's control for very long, so there's not as much psychic trauma. And Vision also references that a couple episodes ago he read Darcy's email.
Dr. Darcy Lewis, I intercepted a communication regarding your work.
Vision asks,
And who is that imposter Pietro?
which is interesting because he has no memory of the outside world, but knew that this guy was a fake. This could be because Wanda kept pictures of the real Pietro around the house. Or maybe Vision has retained some of his memories subconsciously, just like he remembers his love for Wanda. Remember, his consciousness is not just the Mind Stone.
Your mind is made up of a complex construct of overlays. Jarvis, Ultron, Tony, me, the stone. If we take out the stone, there's still a whole lot of Vision left, perhaps the best parts.
When Wanda starts to lose control of her powers, the Stork from episode 3 makes a reappearance, along with the previous set decorations and stairs. There's another fourth wall break when the interviewer asks,
Do you think maybe this is what you deserve?
and that's interesting because Wanda knows that he's not supposed to speak.
You're not supposed to talk.
But also, there's the question itself. As we see later on, this is Agnes asking the question. So she wants Wanda to think that she deserves to be punished for killing the Vision or for manipulating the people of Westview. This guilt serves two purposes. One, if Wanda feels guilty or unsure of herself, then she's easier to control. And two, it further distracts Wanda from the truth that Agatha is actually controlling the town. Monty G on Twitter pointed out a couple of witch Easter eggs to me. So it was once believed that a witch's mole was a sign that she was being controlled by the devil. And this line
I actually did bite a kid once.
Refers to the long history of witches eating children, specifically Hansel and Gretel.
And she knew what she must do.
What you say?
Agnes is babysitting the twins, a nod to her time as Franklin Richards' nanny in the comics. Billy says,
"You're quiet, Agnes."
Meaning that he can't read her mind. Remember earlier when Billy said,
"My head feels weird. It's like really noisy."
This could be because he was reading two sets of thoughts, both the characters in the show and the real people who were trapped underneath that character. But with Agnes, there is no person trapped underneath, so her mind is quiet. It could also be that she's too powerful for him to read. Now let's go to Monica's superhero origin moment. In the comics, she's had the superhero identities Captain Marvel, Photon, and Spectrum, and this is actually very much like her original origin, forcing her way into a barrier of energy. Now this one is a deep cut from D4 Phillips on Twitter. The numbers that Monica inputs are on a spectrometer, that's a light reader, and remember, one of Monica's superhero names is Spectrum. So when you graph out all these numbers, it turns into the shape of a hexagon. This is so cool, unless they're lying. They could be lying to me. I didn't do the math and check this. So as she attempts to enter the hex, the reflection on her helmet is a nod to 2001: A Space Odyssey, and of course the whole sequence is very reminiscent of how Auntie Carol got her powers. Notice how as she passes through the barrier, we see phases of her different eras. We have the 60s, the 70s, when she first entered the barrier, and the present. The dialogue is from Captain Marvel when she's encouraging her mother to go into space to help Carol.
Using brand new aerospace tech is dangerous. And you used to do that?
And then Fury's line about her getting powers.
You learn to glow. Oh, only if you learn to glow like your Auntie Carol.
Now, this could simply be to show us the parallel between these moments and today. Or this could simply be her memories. Or, I think, a result of her atoms being reconfigured. The way they were reconfigured when she was brought back from the blip.
Lieutenant Trouble.
It could be that what happens here, Monica getting powers, is only possible because she was blipped. So in a sense, because her body's learning to move faster than light, she could be reliving all moments of her life at the same time. After passing through the portal, she can see the Matrix. In the comics, Monica can see or become all different wavelengths of light, and we're seeing the beginning of that power here. But that 2001 Easter egg isn't just a fun visual throwaway. That moment in the movie was about a human man evolving and growing into something more, just like Monica is becoming superhuman here. As Vision and Darcy try to drive home, random impediments block their way. This is another nod to The Truman Show, where the show's director has to contrive traffic and disasters to keep Truman where he wants him to be.
Beautifully synchronized, don't you agree?
But this gives Vision time to catch up on the events of Age of Ultron.
My corporal form was born of Ultron's plan for global genocide.
This is also like the comics, where Vision's memory was erased and had to be retaught everything about his own life. He also name drops Jarvis, Tony's AI, who was based on his childhood butler, and who was originally voiced by Paul Bettany.
Jarvis?
Doctor.
Doctor? Pennypacker?
When Monica storms into Wanda's house, she's now wearing a red hoodie, symbolizing that she's at least ready to break free from the control that Agatha has wrapped her in. Dennis the mailman is now working for a delivery company called Presto, whose logo is a running rabbit. This is a nod to the magic performed in the show, the trick of pulling a rabbit out of the hat, and Senior Scratchy himself. Notice his uniform is even purple, the color Agatha Harkness wears in the show and in the comics. And if you had any doubt that Monica was a superhero now, she pulls off a 3-point landing.
Superhero landing!
Monica's line,
I can't control this pain anymore, and I don't think I want to. Because it's my truth.
really cuts to the heart of the show. By trying to run from her pain, Wanda has actually embraced the lie. To defeat the enemy, Agatha, she has to control her grief and accept the loss of her loved ones.
We can't reverse death, no matter how sad it makes us.
During Vision's last direct address, he points out,
"It's mere weeks ago.
It's a pretty meta line to remind the audience that from Wanda's point of view, Infinity War just happened. I also thought it was interesting that when he walked away from his interview, he's actually still in the van. Reality shows have always structured their interviews like you're listening to people's inner thoughts.
I've been waiting all week to have a conversation with this guy.
It never occurred to me that Modern Family was employing the device for the same reason. Wanda looks around Agatha's house and sees something extremely creepy. Yo gabba gabba. And then she sees this creepy moth. Now, in the past, people believed that moths were created by witches with the help of the devil. That would make sense since it looks like Agatha's growing a demon in her basement. This also reads like a reference to Silence of the Lambs when Clarice spots a moth, and you know what, just in case you haven't seen the movie, I'm going to stop there. Now, I'm not an entomologist, so this could also be a cicada, the symbol of rebirth and change. The twins' disappearance could be for a couple reasons. One, Agatha, typical witch, has kidnapped them for her own nefarious reasons. This would make sense, because she's encouraged Wanda to become pregnant in the first place.
Seduction techniques.
School admissions.
All of this is for the children.
For the children.
Or, in the comics, Wanda's twins are imaginary, so when she stops thinking about them, they disappear. But I doubt if that's what's happening here. I don't think Disney Plus would end their flagship Marvel show by committing child murder. So let's talk about Agatha's creepy-ass serial killer basement. Look past the obvious Patrick Bateman plastic sheeting. When she enters the basement, the aspect ratio shifts to widescreen, the same as the outside world. So this is telling us that we are now outside the hex. Thanks Aksat Shaw for pointing that out. There are more moths flying around. We hear a cat meowing. In the comics, Agatha has a familiar cat named Ebony who can grow, Battle Cat style. But it looks like in this show that Senor Scratchy is her familiar. So maybe, like Ebony, he can suddenly lunge into attack. Now notice these strange crests above the entrances, which are shaped like hexagons, and I'm betting that the chamber itself is also shaped like a hexagon, and this is the origin point for the hexagonal shape of Westview. The vines even seem to be stemming from this point to show Agatha's influence spreading throughout the town. There's also a cabinet filled with skulls and bones, but most importantly, we see this book. It looks like a spell book emanating the same energy that Wanda uses. So this is clearly the book that Agatha is using to exert influence over Wanda. Or maybe she needs Wanda's energy to open the book to begin with. And also, Wanda's intro has been increasingly lower energy with every episode.
Previously on WandaVision. Previously on WandaVision. Previously on WandaVision. Previously on WandaVision.
This could very much imply that Agatha is draining her energy to open this book. So here's a fun connection to Doctor Strange. In the library of Kamar-Taj, there is a forbidden section where the Book of Caligostro is kept. But notice that there's a book missing from that section. Now this could be the very book that Agatha possesses. And notice, they are hung up in hexagon chains. Now, as for what book this is, Marvel has so many magic books, it's really even hard to hazard a guess. Maybe it's the Darkhold, which was already featured on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but looked different. But since Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. aren't really part of the MCU canon anymore, and that could be a totally different reality, then this could be just a different Darkhold. But the Vision and Scarlet Witch comic featured a book called the Druid Tome, which was used to contain an evil spirit called Samhain. So maybe Agatha is trying to free him or some other dark being from the book. For instance, a demon named Chthon is another evil god who lived inside the Darkhold and took control of Wanda in the comics. There's also demon heads on the columns that look very much like the stained glass window that we saw in the Loki trailer, fueling speculation that Agatha might actually be working for Mephisto.
The devil's in the details, Bev.
That's not the only place he is.
When Agatha shows Wanda she's behind everything, she blasts her with purple mind control energy, the counter to Wanda's red mind control that we saw in Age of Ultron. This is really setting up Agatha as the version of evil Wanda, the counterpoint to all of her powers. And then we get a brief mid-credits scene, where Monica finds the basement but is intercepted by Peter, who, I'm willing to bet, is just a minion of Agatha's. When Peter used his super speed, we all assumed those blue streaks were to imitate Pietro's powers. But now it seems like this was because he was using Agatha's purple energy all along.
What?
But if that's the case, does that mean that Agatha plucked Peter from the X-Men universe and that she's aware of the multiverse? Is Agatha's end goal to use Wanda to gain control of other realities? So many questions, and we're going to explore these further in our Every Clue video. Keep an eye out for that one.
And I killed Sparky too.
That really sucks, lady!
Well, that's all the Easter eggs that I found, but if you found any, let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and ring the bell. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.